is this a surprise to you in that it's Ethan Horvath, Sean Johnson, and Matt Turner, and maybe more importantly, who it isn't, Zack Steffen is not going to the World Cup?
I am shocked. I'm not a Steffen fan. I've made that very clear on
Very
our
clear.
podcast. But any time I've criticized him, it's been in the context of debating whether he or Matt Turner should be starting. I never imagined he would drop out altogether from the roster. But I couldn't help but think, I still remember the day when he signed with Manchester City and U.S. fans were celebrating on Twitter. And you, Stu Holden, you were the one dissenting voice who came in and said, I don't know if this is such a great thing for his career. And you could draw a straight line from that decision to him being left out today. So I think you ended up being correct in the end.
Yeah, it's a difficult one because you think about these big money moves that guys make. Two that were notably left off the roster. Ricardo Pepi went to Augsburg for $20 million. Zack Steffen goes to Manchester City. And I didn't foresee Steffen being the number one at that time. It was actually Brad Guzan who was in the mix. And then Matt Turner's massive ascent and rise has put him into that position. But I, like you, Mosse, still felt that Steffen would be a part of this roster. Not without his criticism. This is a guy who's had injury problems over the last 2 years. When he has played, he hasn't played convincingly well. He made a move in this last offseason to go to Middlesbrough to get games because I think he felt the walls were closing in a bit and he was losing the grips on that position too, Matt Turner. And ultimately, he's paid the price of that. I still wonder if there's some part of that has gone on behind the scenes with Steffen and Berhalter. But you cannot say that Gregg Berhalter wasn't brave in his decision because this is a guy I think we can unanimously agree was a Berhalter guy.
Yep.
With him in Columbus, he brought him back from Europe. He had been the starter for this national team even when not playing well. And now all of a sudden he's not on the roster. And I'm not saying I disagree with the decision. I'm actually okay with it because I think that Matt Turner is the number one and I would be happy with Sean Johnson as the number two.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we get through this whole 26, the jury is still going to be out on Gregg Berhalter. And I think those that have disagreed with him are going to find some common ground. But I also think that those that have kind of championed him are going to be scratching their heads. I don't think ultimately anybody is going to be happy with this roster. Maybe that's the sign of a good roster. When it comes to, I mean, first off, I don't think any of us disagree now. The starter is Matt Turner.
Matt Turner,
okay,
yeah.
It is going to be Matt Turner. Although, he was on the bench today coming off an injury, but Gregg Berhalter made it very clear that he is going to be fine unless, knock on wood, and we don't want anybody to get hurt between now and then. I guess I should say also that this roster can be changed all the way up to 24 hours before the World Cup if there is an injury or a COVID type of situation. So, yes, it's set in stone ultimately when you hand it to FIFA, but there can be some changes up to 24 hours. But when it comes to this particular move, I think maybe more so than any move, this shows that Gregg Berhalter, that sentimentality that you were talking about, because we all know that there was a piece of Zack Steffen in his heart, and it was his guy. I think Gregg Berhalter shows that he can be pragmatic and that in a certain sense, he can be ruthless, because this had to have been a hell of a phone call for him to make to Zack Steffen.
But don't you think about the way I'm analyzing this? If injuries are a part of Zack Steffen's story, like it or not, form has been a part of his story. I also think if you're committing and you're Gregg Berhalter, and I think in his mind he's saying Matt Turner's the number one, it then becomes about the team around them, right? And the collective and the dynamic. So Sean Johnson, you're assuming is your two. Your number three guy historically never plays in a World Cup. It's a guy that's good around the team. He's a glue guy. He's fun. He's a good trainer. He pushes guys. I wonder if he said, Zack Steffen, you're not my number one, he wouldn't be happy as a number three, and therefore creates this dynamic. You want to give your number one goalkeeper that confidence that you're my guy, and you're not looking over your shoulder and thinking, if I have one mess up, Zack Steffen in there. So maybe you've removed that element completely and said, these are the three that we're going with.
I think we're gonna talk about that a lot in some of these decisions that were made in terms of that dynamic. And look, we are on the outside, and we'll scream and yell, and we'll have our opinions. But I think if Gregg Berhalter was here through this show, and we make some of these some of these debates and these arguments, we would say, from my position, blah 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 blah, and then Gregg Berhalter would say, yeah, but I'm in a position where I see everything that goes on. I don't just see that 90 minutes. I don't just see that save. I see how that player interacted when he came in to a dinner that we have. I see how that player reacted when I told him he was starting or when I told him he wasn't starting. And to your point, that dynamic is huge. We all understand that. By the way, in history, there's been times where we have had, players like Casey Keller and Tony Meola on the same team. You don't have to like your teammates, okay? You have to respect them, I think. But you would be surprised at the dynamics sometimes that exist that can still result in teams winning. Players want to win, and they will put up with anything. They will accept anything. They will look the other way for a lot of different things. They're able to compartmentalize, and like I said, they are incredibly ruthless when it comes to who they play with and what those people are. But coaches have to take the group into consideration, and to your point, I think it probably was taken into consideration.
Indeed.
Stu is treating this like it's a given, but do you agree that it's Sean Johnson 2, Horvath 3? That's the pecking order behind Turner?
I think so. I mean, either one, ultimately, I don't think it changes a whole lot, but I think it's far and away now very, very clear that Matt Turner is the number one goalkeeper. So if that was his goal, just by doing this here and the way that we're talking about it, we're reacting, I think mission accomplished.
Yeah.